From learning the best workflow to take any brief to an awesome design, to actually following a complete logo design process, today's course is going to show you some of the best processes and workflows a graphic designer can actually use on their projects. And first, we're going to follow a design process from start to finish on an actual design. Okay, so the first thing we've got to do is to define the objective and the audience of our design. Now I'm going to be designing a soap package design later in the video so you can see how this process actually works in real time on a real design. But yeah, first we should establish the audience and the objective of the design. So let's say we're working on the packaging and branding for an organic and somewhat higher end soap product. But how can we determine the objectives of the project that we've actually been given? Well, we need to refer to the brief and the initial client information, of course. And I could extrapolate that the objective is to make the packaging of the soap appear high-end, clean and delicate, whilst adhering to the organic and natural themes of that kind of brand. Our audience are females who can afford to spend above average for some soap and who sometimes like to pamper and indulge themselves while they still feel like they're helping the environment. Now, our soap and brand packaging likely shouldn't be that sort of generic and cheap looking soap, but also I don't want to make a design that is overflowing with opulence and lavish motifs. I want to position it somewhere in the middle, but in the kind of upper middle end, if that makes sense. And of course, you should go into more detail on your target audience and the industry, but it does come down to something important, and that is how much you're getting paid and how much time you wish to spend on a project. It's all relative, of course, to your situation, but you should aim to understand the audience and the objective of the design. So we've established the main audience and the main objective of the design. This is when you need to conduct some good old research. Again, depending on how much you've been paid and how intricate you want your design process to be, will determine how long you spend on the research phase. And I'm not going to talk too long about this, but here are some key points to take away or to keep in mind. The brief is the starting point, of course, and from there you can look into competitors of your client and look at the industry standard. You might go against the industry standard to, well, stand out, or comply with it to fit in. Now, I always point out Snapchat and how they could easily have gone for blue with their brand because it falls in line with the standard for social media brands. But they went against the grain and they opted for a bright and a bold yellow logo and brand, which literally does stand out. Now, you might want to look deeper into your audience, compile mood boards, make sketches, even conduct surveys or browse existing surveys on people relevant to that brand. Again, for the soap packaging that we're soon going to design, I want to gather all sorts of information about the audience and the industry, what materials are used in making the soap and the packaging, what feels good in terms of the packaging texture, and so on. And again, this just comes back to knowing your client's industry, the audience, and everything involved with that. Most people would jump straight into the concept creation phase at this point, but I have a different route that does make sense. At this stage, I like to nail down my color palette choices, my shape psychology choices, and typeface selection. Working on the soap brand packaging, I'd now return to the keywords from the objective and the research to make some really clear, decisive choices. Those words are high-end, clean, and delicate. And a pro tip here is to get your objective down to one concise sentence or phrase for that matter, because you can actually come back to it at any point in the design process, and you can make things really easy if you do this. All of your design choices should relate back to this sentence. Also in my research, I've established that my target audience are female and they likely adhere to high-end products, or at least don't mess around with cheap and cheerful products. With that in mind, I want to go for a low saturation in my color choice, and that's so the design seems soft and delicate. I also think an off-white or kind of faded white would be a good idea to throw into the mix, and that's to represent the clean side of the brief. Let's also run with purple because it's regal, it's feminine, and it is quite prestigious. But remember, I want to go for a low saturation or something like this, as that would work really well. That's my color scheme decided in correspondence to my research and the brief. Shape psychology is also going to be pretty easy. When considering a feminine product that is meant to be organic, what kind of shapes or shape psychology ideas do you have, or what comes to mind? I'm going to make use of a circular shape in some way on my design, and that's to continue the feminine design narrative, and I think making use of floral motifs will link back to that organic aspect that I want to get across. Also, maybe including horizontal lines would be a great way to express relaxation and peace, something that people who pamper themselves might appreciate. And lastly, for this section, my typography choices. Now for luxury, you'd expect maybe a serif typeface solution. However, I'm going to run with a sans serif, and I don't want the design to look overly serious or just too luxurious. I've elected a thin and sans serif which would communicate luxury and sophistication more than a bold, thicker sans serif. Learning about typeface psychology is absolutely essential to being an optimum and advanced graphic designer, and if you don't know that already, you should be studying it so you're familiar with it in and out. Basically, it's just how typefaces express certain emotions. At this point, you can also consider imagery and textures, but again, it comes down to how much you're being paid and how long you want to spend on a project. Now on my design, I don't want any imagery apart from the organic line drawing patterns of the leaves. And that's because I think the design should be somewhat minimal to convey that clean narrative. Now the texture elements will heavily come down to the materials chosen when printing the design. And that choice would be important to convey the extra layer of luxury and sensation because soap is a very sensual kind of product. I'd opt for something organic and recyclable, but something that feels tactile and not cheap to the touch. Again, every choice we make should be linked back to the objective and the target audience, and this is a quick and a simple demonstration of that. So, when you've got your design to a point where you think it's ready to print or to send to the client, stop. Stop right there, because don't send it just yet. Depending on how much time you have, here are some pro tips that you should keep in mind before printing or sending anything to your client. Firstly, of course, spell check every single thing on your design, and also just look for errors in general. If you're working on a print project, print that puppy out and test to see how it looks in real life, in your hands, and on different kinds of paper. Now you might want to mock up your design in real life situations just to see how it functions. And so for the soap design, maybe it would be wise to see how it looks in a store, on a shelf against other soap products. Also, think about showing your design to other people whose opinion you do value. This entire section at the end here aims to weed out any weakness on your design and also put things into perspective for your design. If your design survives this phase, then it's on to the next phase, which is the presentation. And that's a whole other process in of itself. But importantly, think about this. What have we just done here in today's video? Well, we've gotten to know the main objectives of the brief and the client's project. We've gotten to know their audience. Then we've gone on and made a visual language and narrative based around that. The design ultimately is then really targeted at a group of people, and it has a lot more chance of being successful and effective in the long run. So next we're venturing into layout design, because I have 3 different quick workflows that you can use to implement layout design on your projects. Are you sometimes confused when it comes to laying out your designs? Well, let's look at process 1 first. This first process is called the hierarchy approach. For this process to work properly, you need to have your design elements in mind for the project, or even perhaps given to you by the client already. By design assets, I mean the imagery, the text content, and so on, just the things that go onto your design. You then need to break your design elements down into 3 crucial groups. Group 1 is the primary element group. Then group 2 is the secondary element group. And the last one is the tertiary group. In this first group, we need to put in the elements we deem to be most important on the design itself. With the example of a music event poster design, we can say the event name and the relevant images go in this group as being most important. In the second group, we can add in the artist names, the people who are going to be playing at the music event, and also the dates of the event itself. And then the third group can contain the website URLs, social media account names, and so on. These are just the little details that don't actually draw in the viewer initially, but are going to be read and looked at last. So when you have your 3 groups ready, it's then time to determine how we're going to use them in terms of hierarchy. Now we could start by aiming for hierarchy of size, and as you move through the different groups, make the less important details smaller on your design. We can also use color and highlight the most important aspects with brighter, bolder colors. Or we could do something like use hierarchy of texture, where some elements are flat and bold to stand out, and less important details are faded with gradients of textures or just kind of fade effects. If you start your design by adding design elements into these three groups, it then becomes easier to lay them out on your design, especially if you use hierarchy of size first and foremost. Here's a quick bonus tip for this approach. So if you use the hierarchy method for your layout, in your project folder on your computer, create 3 different folders that are hierarchy based and then put relevant elements into each folder, and this will help you be more optimized for your workflow and organization. The next layout approach is probably my favorite, and it works on almost any design project you can think of. This is the modular layout process. With this approach, we aim to make life a whole lot easier for ourselves, and here's exactly how. A module is a section of a grid, often square or rectangle. The first step is to determine what shape modules you want to work with. Do you want a grid made up of squares, rectangles, or perhaps even circles? It will depend on the dimensions and the style of your project. The next step is really important. You need to ask yourself, how many modules do I need? This is important because it can determine how busy or not busy your design becomes. If we had a double-page brochure design that was for a vacation company, each page being a square dimension, I would probably make 4 large modules in each page, 2 up and 2 down, and then split each module into 4 smaller modules inside of that. But this is just an example, of course. So here's the first pro tip for the module grid layout approach. You can also draw in buffer lines, maybe a fraction apart from the lines originally, and this can create micro white space, which we'll look at later. When you have your modules in place, you can now begin to allocate your design elements into the modules. If an element is large and important, it might take up 1 or 2 large modules. But then if an element is smaller and less important, it might occupy 1 or 2 of the smaller inner modules. The buffer lines really do help when it comes to helping your text and other elements not touch each other. In doing so, we have micro white space between them, and this helps keep a visually cohesive and professional design. And it's especially helpful for laying out bodies of text on your designs. And I've got another pro tip for this layout approach as well. When you've made a module grid, either group all of the lines together or collapse them down onto one layer, and you can then just hide and unhide it throughout your design process. And this will help you to see how the design is going and how it looks without having the grid lines in place. Process number 3 is the asymmetrical layout process. Now for this approach to work on a layout design, we need to establish a focal point, but before that, we need to set some goals. We can use the example of a landing page design to show this method and how it works, but of course, this applies to most layout design projects. So the goal for this landing page might be to show off and raise awareness of a new tech gadget, which then leads to potential clicks and sales on the product. The very first thing to do is to create a focal point, ideally a little off center or just completely off to one side of your layout. For our focal point here, we can simply use the product gadget itself. Then we'll begin to add in other elements in harmony, yet in contrast to the focal point on the other side, adjacent to the focal point. Now you can think of this layout as having a large area made up of just 1 or 2 elements. Then that is mirrored against the other area where we have a collection of numerous smaller objects. In this second area, we can have our CTAs and text content, and we can make the CTA stand out with contrast and color and so on. A bonus tip to keep in mind for this approach is to focus on contrast and use white space to create a distinction between the 2 areas. And now we're going to look at a 5-step process that you can apply to any project brief. The first step in this process asks you to do something that not many designers are going to tell you, but it's absolutely essential. You need to have empathy. Consider this. Take a logo project for a financial company. Empathizing with their target audience, you choose blue for trust and reliability, and you incorporate a shield and an eagle for strength and security. These choices and these concepts, they can only be arrived at with initial empathy. But it's not just about symbolism. It's about a subtle idea being expressed through the logo as well. Those horizontal lines that you can see on the logo, they're not just aesthetic choices. They're deliberate design elements meant to evoke a sense of calmness and stability. It's shape psychology. The empathy-driven approach distinguishes a mere logo from a powerful brand symbol, fostering trust and a connection amidst uncertainty. Understanding the needs and the emotions of both audience and client isn't just design. It's the key to building a connection with the client and the audience through every single pixel. This brings us on to the next step. Transitioning from empathy to defining problems and goals is pivotal to any design project, especially in corporate branding for startups. So imagine a new company is eager to carve its niche in a competitive market. To begin, it's imperative to immerse oneself as a designer in their world. You need to understand their audience, the industry dynamics, and the competitors. So you need to take the empathy from the first step and what kind of things you realized from that step, and then realize or understand some problems for your project in regard to the empathy. And when you know these problems, you can make some goals that you need to achieve with your design. So for this new branding startup, we might ask if the challenge here is going to be gaining credibility in the industry because they're going to be totally new as a company. Maybe they will need to stand out amidst the noise. Or perhaps it's going to be about forging an emotional connection with their customers. Now, I designed this logo for a financial company. So the problems or the challenges on this project were the design needed to appeal to a young but also an old audience. It had to be modern while still appearing somewhat traditional, and that can be a challenge. So I went for a shield to evoke protection, and this is also an established, reified traditional element, but I incorporated that in a minimal and a modern kind of way. The eagle wings also have been created and refined in a minimal manner as well. With the problems fully realized, you can then create goals to achieve which would actually create a success roadmap for your graphic design. These objectives could range from creating a memorable logo that encapsulates the brand's essence to developing a comprehensive brand guideline that maintains consistency across different platforms. So moving from problems and goal setting to generating creative solutions is the next important step. Now, we've all heard of things like brainstorming and ideation sessions. This is where designers unleash a torrent of ideas, keywords, and concepts. Yes, and these do work well, but there is another really interesting and useful way to make design concepts I'm going to show you right now. Now, I'm talking about reverse brainstorming. Instead of brainstorming ideas to solve a design problem, try and brainstorm potential ways to cause problems for your design projects. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but hear me out. A perfect example of this is, let's say a graphic designer is tasked to make a website for an organization. Here, the designer can reverse brainstorm ways to confuse, frustrate, or overwhelm the website visitors, and this might create concepts that go against those ideas. In doing so, the designer identifies areas for improvement and develops user-friendly design solutions, simply because they brainstorm ways to confuse the website audience. Pretty cool. Now, I must say, however, there are many ways to create concepts, and a designer should always be aware of multiple different methods, and you should try and see what works best for you. This radical way of thinking completely shatters the assumptions and basic thinking, and opens the door for new creativity and new concepts, and that in turn can appeal to the audience in a very different way. In this phase, creativity knows no bounds. It's about getting unfamiliar and getting uncomfortable, but make sure that your ideas aim to solve the problems and the goals from step 2. That is super important. But by encouraging wild ideas and unconventional thinking, designers unearth gems hidden beneath the surface, transforming challenges into opportunities and paving the way for groundbreaking design solutions. So in step 4, we see things evolve from the ideation into the actual design concept phase. This is where designers take ideas and polish them up into actual functional working concepts. Now consider the redesign of a trendy Japanese sushi bar. You could brainstorm concepts such as enhancing customer experience and reflecting the restaurant's unique cuisine and culture, and this could be distilled into refined ideas that align with the establishment's identity and their goals. So, some concepts for the menu might be hand-drawn Japanese illustrations, or perhaps even a Zen-inspired style menu, and so on. While doing this, it is very important to keep in mind the previous steps that we talked about, especially the goals and the achievements that you need to work into your design. For example, some of the goals for the menu of the sushi bar might have been to create an easy to read and minimal menu design. And this is so the customers don't become confused or swamped with too much information, and the menu appears minimal and sophisticated. With that in mind, on screen, only one concept design would work for this project. This concept process ensures that every design decision serves a purpose, and this results in a menu that is not only showcasing dishes, but also enhances the overall dining experience, enticing customers and fostering a memorable impression of the restaurant's culture. But the concepts are not the final stage. We actually need to head into stage 5, which is where you refine those concepts into final design solutions. Designers here should evaluate each concept alignment if it's actually with the sushi bar's identity and the goals. You need to prioritize those that effectively communicate its unique offerings and resonate with the target audience. Visual refinement follows, and that's with careful selection of typography, color palettes, and imagery to convey the desired tone and atmosphere. Typography choices reflect the restaurant's style, the color palettes evoke the ambience, and imagery acts to entice diners with appetizing visuals. Layout compositions are fine-tuned for clarity and coherence, guiding diners seamlessly through the menu while highlighting key dishes. Through this meticulous process, each refined concept evolves into a polished design that not only reflects a restaurant's identity, but also enhances the overall dining experience, enticing customers to indulge in their journey at this restaurant. So, we've arrived at the logo design part of this course, and we're going to look at a real-life project from start to finish when it comes to logo design. So, how do I get from point A to point B with a real-life logo design project? The most important part in any logo design project is arguably the first few phases. And in case you're wondering, aileron for the typography is a strong presence in today's video. I know you guys love to know which fonts I'm using. So discussing the project with the client early on is really essential. You need to know everything about the client, their business, their goals and their pain points, and also their target audience. So let's get to know the client for this project and let's travel along that journey of the logo design process. The client for this specific logo design project reached out to me and described the situation in full. They were a new brand planning to launch in the jiu-jitsu world and had no logo or even a brand name. And that was their main fundamental problem I had to solve. This initial message is only one section, of course, but the first main action I did was to pull up some keywords of interest that would really help me later down the line. And you might be asking how a keyword is going to help you. How far can that actually go? Well, they simply help to better understand the project and the direction of the brand and the logo. So obviously, jiu-jitsu is going to be one keyword. And then I had things like teaching, people, team, strong, and community. You're probably going to notice from these first initial keywords, there's a kind of a sense of connection, of team, of togetherness, of people, but also a sense of strength and willingness. And of course, that's because it's a martial arts. So yeah, you'd expect that anyway. These words all describe the business and the overall feeling of the brand. And also remember, I had to actually generate the brand name for this project we're going to get to soon. But trying to think of the project in this way early on really will help you later down the line in your logo design projects. Oh, and there's also one crucial thing that you should never forget. Before you even design anything, you absolutely must secure a contract. Yes, I know I've mentioned it before on this channel, and I myself have actually fallen victim to, getting screwed over because I had no contract in design project. And granted, that was a long time ago now. But if you're still unsure how to write a contract, or you might even want a free template, just click that card in the corner. But yeah, moving on, the backbone of any logo design project is research, of course. So in case you guys didn't actually know, here's a brief description of what jiu-jitsu is. It's a martial art my logo and brand needed to relate to. And of course, also the jiu-jitsu community had to jive with my logo design and brand name. One of the first methods I used for research here was to actually make mood boards. And I often find them pretty useful. They can help to build a picture or a vibe of the business and the client, as well as the project direction. This was just one part of my mood board, and as you can see, typography is mainly a bold sans serif font in other existing designs. And also there's quite a strong sense of geometry in a lot of these designs, and we're going to soon dive deeply into that, trust me. Now, as I conducted more and more research, it became obvious to me that a serif font would not work for this brand. Serifs are way too formal and traditional, and they wouldn't fit the narrative for a martial arts studio or any kind of sporting logo. But this is probably obvious to most designers anyway. One huge part of my logo design process, and something I mentioned in the logo design process e-guide, is the use of keywords. I actually asked the client in the initial stages to send over some keywords that relate to their brand and the message of the company. And these are some of the important ones that I pulled out from that list. I added to the list myself as well, but these keywords did help me build up concepts later in the logo design process. And you yourself should aim to get these keywords from your clients as early on as possible. But one crucial thing to keep in mind is that these keywords, they should resonate with the target audience of your client's brand. So as an example, in this specific project, that would be people who potentially would sign up to jiu-jitsu school or class, and these people would likely want to have a sense of community, togetherness, and a desire to become stronger and skilled in martial arts. A strong and robust expression is something that a martial arts school might want to give out in their brand, image, and logo. So always think about the keywords and then how they relate back to the target audience when you're designing a logo. Now, I didn't know much or anything about jiu-jitsu before this project, so I made sure that I studied, I researched, and I knew pretty much everything there is to know about it. I even got to know the terminologies and the lingo in this actual industry sector. I feel like the better you understand your client's industry sector or niche, the far more superior your logo design will actually end up being. The keywords and body of research then lead onto the actual designing. Finally, right? But if you really want to make an efficient logo design, then you're really going to take the next step seriously. So here I generated other keywords around my initial ones. So for example, I have some words for the keywords strong that I felt would actually relate back to the brand and the concept. I'd suggest trying this out for each of your original keywords. You won't regret it. These keywords have a true power and place in the logo design process, and you'll see how they can actually help generate several really good concepts. And to do that, you're going to need to bring the keywords together into pairs. And of course, in this project, it actually helped me make that brand name. So here are some of the word pairs that I generated. And as you can see, each pair relates back to the brand and they utilize those words, those very keywords from the previous phase. And here's a useful trick when making these word pairs. Try to think about things in a visual way and how you might actually demonstrate those words or those pairs in a concept visually speaking. So for example, grip might be a fist in some way. And this is where the creative side of things start to come into play in the process. But yeah, I wanted to add jiu-jitsu at the very end of the brand name to incorporate that into the logo itself. This is something I spoke to the client about before I did it, just to see they were on the same page as I was for this part of the design. So once I decided on the crucial brand name thanks to the keywords and the word pairs, which was iron grip, I again generated words around that pair to come up with my logo concepts. I do love keywords, as you can tell. I try to think about things visually again and what words might communicate the message effectively. One initial idea that came to mind was a fist due to the word grip, and grip is a huge part of jiu-jitsu. Thanks to my crash course in jiu-jitsu researching the project. I know a fist is quite cliche, but this was just an initial starting point, to be honest. The fist was also way too detailed, so I started to make up simple shapes that could maybe resemble a fist in some way, as you can see here. I also considered shape psychology and how that relates back to martial arts and sports. Stability and strength are communicated by straight edge shapes and straight lines. I thought this was a really good choice to pursue, and I learned this from my research earlier. I actually decided on the shape psychology early on in the process. And like I said, a serif font was never on the cards for this logo design, but I finally went for a bold sans serif typeface for this logo, and this would fit in line with the brand a lot better than a serif. And again, going back to the research, the choice of typography was really easy because I had that body of research. Another concept that I wanted to explore was that of using G in grip. I simplified things from a G into somewhat side view of a fist, but added a hook section here that will actually give a metallic kind of feel, which again just relates back to the iron part of that brand name. It's often things like this, these small details that do leverage your logo and give you some good talking points and some kind of legs to stand on in the pitch to the client. Now I went on and applied more shape psychology and made sure to include straight edges so the logo does conform to a strong, robust nature. However, some of the important keywords were team and togetherness, if you remember. And so to incorporate that, I referred back to my shape psychology and added a circular shape which is conforming to that. I was now headed in the final direction for the logo, and I felt that there was just too much negative space right here. If the logo was set on top of typography, it would just look a bit odd having this much space right here. So I came up with several design solutions to resolve that issue, and these are the 3 logo design solutions. I really like this design, and I thought this was a strong, iconic, and it just simply worked. However, here's the plot twist. The client wanted design finally as seen here, the triangle edition, and I personally don't prefer this design, but hey, client always wins, right? Now, which design do you prefer, and do you like this design process? Let me know in the comment down below, and of course, until next time guys, design your future today. Peace.